Have you ever had a moment when your body whispered something so clearly that you couldn't ignore it anymore? What if your chronic pain, your exhaustion, or even that lingering heaviness in your chest wasn't a malfunction, but a message? Today's guest, Inna Segal, takes us straight into the hidden language of the body and what she uncovered during a 3-hour life changing healing experience will challenge what you think you know about pain, trauma, and the human spirit. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today, I am speaking with Inna Segal. Inna is a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness, and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body, translated into 27 languages and sold over 1 million copies worldwide so far. Her journey began after years of illness and the tragic stillbirth of her child, which led her to discover a profound ability to heal herself. From that turning point, she dedicated her life to helping others transform pain into freedom. And for over 25 years, she has worked with people worldwide, from doctors and psychologists to trauma survivors and creatives, teaching how to uncover true roots of suffering and restore health through wisdom of the body and soul. Inna, welcome to the show.
So good to be here with you, Dan. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to tell everyone about your story, or set up your story for you to expound upon. But before I do that, I was really pulled from in the forward of your book, Dr. Bernie Siegel, among the wise and mindful things he wrote. I wanted to lead us off with this that sets us up for this conversation. And that is, pain is necessary for us to protect and define ourselves. If we never experienced pain, it would be a disaster for our lives and our bodies. But when we give the pain or affliction meaning, we do not have to suffer. Pain and suffering are two distinct entities.
Mm,
That's powerful.
it is really powerful.
I know there's plenty you can say about that, but that's my lead in, everyone. That's my lead in to Inna's journey, which I'm going to set up now. Inna spent a childhood and adolescence and very early young adulthood with multiple chronic, serious health conditions, going to multiple types of doctors, often 5 days a week at some point. Among your health conditions was back pain and debilitating back pain. You then get exposed to alternative treatment and health modalities through your partner at the time. And now you're going to chiropractors and other alternative healers. And there's this one day that you are having this, not knowing how you can go on with your back pain. And you go and see this chiropractor. And the chiropractor essentially says to you, your body is stuck and wants to remain so. And you said, okay, what do I do? And he said, nothing, go home. And I can only imagine what that would have felt like on the physical, emotional, and spiritual level. And you go home with your pain, with yourself, and decide you needed to take your healing into your own hands. And from there, the next part of the journey begins.
Yeah, and I love the way that you've shared it. Yeah, I felt like when I went home, I was in that state of, he's saying the body's stuck, so the body has some kind of a consciousness, some kind of an awareness and understanding that is somehow different to my regular way of thinking. And I want to access that. I want to access that language and that understanding. And so I knew nothing, or very little, I should say. And the tools that I did have came from essentially going to acting classes, I'm going to say, because that's one of the main things that I did that was very creative and connected to, going and exploring something within yourself. And so I really started by just placing my hands on my back, breathing into the pain, and recognizing that I've never allowed myself to feel the pain because I'd always hold my breath. And it's that thing of, what Dr. Bernie Siegel said in terms of consciousness. How can I give meaning to something that I'm trying to run away from? Yeah, I spent most of the
Mhm.
time running from. And as I was doing that, again, I actually, it was a really strange place that I was in because I was aligned to heal. So my thinking, my feeling, kind of my will, my whole being was aligned to heal. But at the same time, I had zero expectations because I just didn't know. And it never happened before that I actually had healing that lasted, I'm going to say. And so as I was doing that, of course, my mind was negative. I was constantly having thoughts about, well, if somebody who's an expert in the field couldn't help you, how the hell can you help yourself when you don't know anything? But, and for that reason, I just started counting backwards from 30 just to try and find a way to connect back without this constant negativity running in my head. And then I asked this question, is, if there is something divine out there. And I was in this conflictual situation at the time because, to me, having a child that died at the age that I had literally just turned 20
Mm.
when it happened. And I actually thought it happened on my birthday. So 2 days before this had occurred, for whatever reason, that's how I felt. And in my mind, it was like, well, if there is a God, why would God do this to me? So I don't, what have I done? Type
Mhm.
of thing. So I was coming into it with, um, well, now I don't have trust in life. And, for me to ask that was really kind of the last resort. It was more like, well, if there is, help me now, type of thing.
Was there almost a surrender aspect to that? Like, almost like a not give up, but I'm giving in. Like, I don't even know anymore. I can't control this.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely that, okay, if there is, I'm going to let go. And I, again, had zero expectations and just felt this warmth move through my body. My eyes were closed, but it felt like golden sunshine is the best way to explain it. And immediately I could sense something unwinding inside of me. And it was like waves moving through your body. And I remember the thought that came, something's happening. And not long after that, and this was again something that was foreign to me to ask or to even think about. And the thought that came was, I wonder what my back actually looks like. And again, there was just zero expectation for anything to happen. But when I describe it, it really felt like somebody put a switch on. It was like there was a switch in my brain that was off, and now it was on all of a sudden. And I all of a sudden could see my back, and I could see it as if we were doing an x-ray. That's the way that I saw it. And it was almost like where the inflammation was, and there was a lot of inflammation inside my back, it came across as this red light to me, and it was circled. And so I could see it, I could feel it. That's obviously also where the pain was. And I I was sitting down to do this, and it was very difficult because my back actually had a twist in it,
Mm,
so in my vertebrae. So no matter how I sat or lay or stood, I was always in pain.
mhm,
And actually seeing that, it was almost like entering into it. And my question, and all of this was connected to just questioning and asking and exploring. And my question from that was, why do I have this? But it was really coming from that place of, I actually want to know. I'm not a victim anymore. Up until that moment, I always felt like I was a victim of my own body. But this was the first time where I was like, I'm not a victim. Why is this? Why did this happen? I genuinely want to know. And at that point, when I asked, again, no expectation, I started to see it was like a memory with consciousness, is the best way to explain it. So it's like I could see the memory of me coming to Australia from Eastern Europe, um, being bullied because I did
mhm,
not know one word of English at school. And I was from children can be very cruel, especially when they've been taught that you are coming from the worst place in the world. So it's okay to treat you badly
mhm,
because they've seen movies about it. So why not, right? Why
mhm,
not join? And I remember just kind of coming from this place of being a very creative, open child who was quite confident, to becoming a shell of myself, to actually going, I don't even know who I am.
and you're seeing all this. I mean,
Yeah,
you're reliving all this when you
yeah,
ask the question of why.
absolutely. And on an emotional level, I'm really tearing up and feeling the pain of it, because I think that when you have trauma, often you actually go into, numbness, because your nervous system goes into that protection mode of, if I really feel this to the degree that it's affecting me, I'm not going to survive. And so that's, I felt like for years and years I'd been in this self protect, numb, you know, whether it was sometimes in fight or flight and sometimes in that state of just being freeze, but mostly freeze,
Mhm,
because I didn't know how to be in the world and be myself, because being myself was dangerous as a child. I was being attacked for it. And so it was really interesting in kind of seeing that and feeling it. And I had a knowing that this was very, very connected to the psoriasis that I was suffering, because obviously I connected the time period as well. And it was like, well,
mm,
that's when it started, was when I started going to school in Australia. So that was really powerful as a kind of entering into the exploration of something like this. And
mhm,
then what was really interesting for me, as I really deeply acknowledged and felt through it, the image change, it was like my consciousness was taking me to the next part of it to show me, okay, so this is what happened in terms of your skin. And now it's almost like, let's start with the easier part, or, the
mhm,
earlier. And now let's go into what really occurred in terms of your back. And that had multiple layers and levels to it, from parts that, my parents were very much in, when I was a teenager, they were really struggling with their marriage and with their relationship. My dad drank a lot of alcohol at the time. My mum didn't really know how to deal with it, and she would scream and kind of really get very upset about it. At the same time, because I had been struggling with school, they decided, or my mom essentially decided to put me into a private school because I was a very good student in general. And that particular school was giving people from Eastern Europe this enormous kind of discounted price, which, my mum didn't obviously think about or understand what would happen if I was in a school with people who came from incredible wealth.
Right.
And here I am coming like from a place where I'm scared to spend any money, because my parents really didn't have much. And it was a real kind of shock to my own system, and I could not explain it. And so again, I just, this time it was easier because I had friends who were, all of us were kind of rejected,
Mm-hmm.
from the rest of the school. But we were friends with each other, and we were all in the self-protect mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was seeing all of this stuff kind of show up, and, and understanding it. And again, I felt this unwinding occurring. And from this, it led to something I'd never really thought about in terms of how does this affect me or anybody else. And that was ancestry. Like I could, and this was not so much a memory as an understanding that showed up, which was that my grandparents had gone through war, through loss. I mean, my
Lots
grandmother,
of
I
trauma.
don't know,
Yeah.
like her story is pretty horrendous, of being the only one who survived out of her 8 brothers and sisters and her mother, and
Mm-hmm.
um, being killed, to save her life. I mean, she was going to be killed anyway, but it's just it's horror.
Yeah.
And my grandparents, both of them, didn't talk about the trauma. They said that they whispered about it to each other, and then didn't talk about it until they came to Australia. And it
Mm.
was, something that really gripped me because I had digestive issues my whole life, and so does everybody else in the family.
Hmm.
And so I again had this kind of inkling that it might be around this. And one of the things that my grandmother said was that when I had this child that died, she said, "I wish it was me." And it was really kind of emotional
Mm-hmm.
for her to say something like that. And I could see how much she was holding for her to make that type of a comment. And and again, there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of realizations of, how much I felt like I was a victim of life, and that I felt my grandparents were victims of life. And kind of moving through all of this and just realizing, that I was that person that I just absorbed other people's energies as well. I always wanted to help everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these insights were so huge, one after another, that I fell asleep in complete exhaustion. And I always say I had the best sleep ever because there was an unwinding that was going on in my sleep. There was an unwinding that happened in a way that it never happened before, because people that I went to 5 times a week, like you said, would
Yeah.
push press points and adjust
Yeah.
and work on my nervous system and all of this stuff. But, and I think it all helped. I really, really think it all helped to get me to that point, because my nervous system was flexible by that stage to allow me to have these types of insights. So I'm very grateful that I did go to these people. But what was missing was my own connection
Mm-hmm.
to what it was, there.
So I know you were in a meditative, if not hypnotic state, self-induced. Do you have any idea in real time and how long that process was? I mean, you went through so many layers. You were showed so
Mm.
many things. I'm curious, like how long was that process?
Over 3 hours at least. Like it
Wow.
was, it wasn't a 5 minute
Yeah.
experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was at least over 3 hours. I was so exhausted by the end that, I was just like, oh my God, it's like you said, a real surrender.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to, I think, say that. And when I woke up the next day, I really felt different inside. It was like my soul could have had more space to come back into the body almost. And I definitely felt much more connected to myself. And I remember thinking, because there was about 70% improvement in the actual pain. And I remember thinking, hey, I am a skeptic of these things just because I didn't want to be disappointed again. That, oh, I think it's going to go and it's a release and then it comes back. And so I actually made a decision at that time. And the decision was that it was going to be a lifestyle almost. It was going to be a way of me connecting and learning about myself and my body, and because we don't know ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm really holding and carrying for the rest of my life. And the next 3 weeks were very intensive, and I had been studying to be a writer, so I was journaling nonstop. And I was trying to, it was almost like, how do I put all these pieces of the puzzle together of my life story meets my ancestors and my grandparents, my parents, even my great grandparents, and how does this connect to me and what I'm going through? And it was just an incredible process. And after these 3 weeks, the psoriasis went and never came back. The back pain went and never came back. I say, if I stand, in high heels for a whole day, which I don't do anymore, but I used to, I might have tinges of pain. Like I can, we can induce those things,
Yeah.
but never in terms of that type of chronic sciatic
Yeah.
pain
You,
where
you
it's
were
so
healed.
hard
I
to
mean,
walk.
we can say you were healed. Those
Yeah,
chronic issues were
yeah,
healed.
yeah.
Um, and I know this. I mean, what's so wonderful also about your story is you didn't intend for any of this. Like this, you were you were led to these situations, and then you had to dig deep, and then this worked on you. So your mom's like, "Hey, can you help your dad?" And like it just rolled into this. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can help my dad. I helped myself, and
Yeah,
it naturally just kept evolving into healing, like healing others.
yeah,
And you know how you said like, well, I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be I was gonna taking acting lessons, and those are all things that you wanted to pursue and
yeah.
achieve, and yet um as they what one of the sayings, God or a man makes plans and God laughs, or something
Yeah.
like that, right? It's like you're like, oh no, you're on this other path, and
Mm,
you became a healer. And so
mm,
when did you like what was the process of actually believing that this is an ability, not only an ability that you have, but actually you were putting together a way of working? Your book is the culmination of that. Like this is a way
mm,
of healing that generalizes and could be taught to others. Like because I know there's the fraud and the self-doubt and the imposter
mm,
syndrome.
mm.
And could you say a little bit about that transition or process for you?
I think it was really like I think the you mentioned about my dad, where my mom asked me to heal, to do healing on him, and I was like, "What are you even talking about? I don't even know what that even means at this point." And she, my mom's very encouraging, and she's quite open minded, and I feel like I had a couple of experiences where all of a sudden I could see things in terms of people's bodies. And with my dad in particular, she said that, oh, he's hurt his leg. Can you do some healing? I really didn't know what healing meant and how to do it, especially he wasn't even in the room, he was
Hmm.
in another household. And but when I concentrated, and I didn't know really like that it was even possible at the time, when I concentrated on his leg, I could see boats. And my mom didn't actually know that he had been on a boat when he'd hurt his leg, because he pretended that he hadn't been. And so we had a very funny interaction with him, of him saying, "What's going on? Why, what are you telling your mom? Where do you know this stuff?" And I think that for about a year, after my own experience, I was like, hey, I'm going to connect to people that I don't know. My intention was to help my grandparents, because I really had this very strong relationship. I want to heal them. I want to help them heal. But um, if I actually do have this ability to, to see things in that way, then, and this is not, I just want to say to people, this, like, my great grandmother actually was a clairvoyant, and she could predict the future. I've never had that. That's never been, my gift in that sense. I cannot predict the future, but I can see what causes a health condition in a person's body. And so, in that very specific way, I was like, okay, firstly, is there anyone else who's done this that I can learn from? And at that time, the only person that I could find that was quite well known was Caroline Myss. And so that kind of made it a lot easier for me, because I would read her books, and I met her and I went to her courses and stuff. And I would read what she wrote, and I'd go, oh my God, that's how I do it. And she worked with doctors, right? So I was like, oh, she works with doctors and she can do this. And, this came to her. And so there was some validation that I
Yeah,
wasn't
a bit of
crazy.
a bit of a roadmap too. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this can be a thing. This
Yeah.
can be a thing in this world. Yes.
Yeah. And somebody can do this and help other people. And I think that this is similar to what she did. I was like, well, I would like to work with a doctor, because I'm this person that, because I've studied writing and I studied literature and linguistics, it is actually very detailed and very logical and almost scientific in some ways, if you want to, bring science into something creative. And in my mind thinks in a very logical, detailed way. So I kind of went, well, yeah, here's a roadmap. She worked with a doctor. Let me find an open minded doctor that I can work with, because I need that endorsement in a way. I need, because essentially, if I could have gone to university, which I went to university for, to write, to learn how to write and to do acting and all of this stuff. If I could go to university and they had a course like this with people like a Caroline Myss who did this for a living, then I would have gone. But there wasn't anything, and I don't still think there is actually, to the detail and the depth that I wanted it to be as well. And so and I needed, I think it's really important for people to understand. I needed to be guided, especially at that time, from somebody who had the same ability. Because I needed to figure out how to work with it. And it was really interesting also. I started doing a lot of courses, and one of them was with this man, and he was actually a person who I'd met because I wanted to die. So I went through this whole I want to die experience because of losing this child, and I'd met him because I went to see a psychologist, because my mental state wasn't good. And this psychologist said to me at the time, is that what you really, really want to experience? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, there's a course on, and this man can take you to the edge of death. And I said to him, where is it? And when is it? And he said, well, it's actually today, and it's 5-hour drive from where you are. And it starts in about 5.5 hours, or so 6 hours, I think, something like that. And I went at the time to my partner, hey, we're going. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know how much it cost. I didn't have anywhere to stay. And what was really interesting with this man as well was that he actually fell off the roof. And when he fell off, he was a builder. when
Mhm.
he fell off the roof, he ended up again opening up some kind of an ability to see people's auras. So it wasn't necessarily like parts of the body, but it was like there was an awareness, and he was, in Australia at the time
Mhm.
available. And so I met him, and he was also doing a lot of Caroline's work at the time. And so it kind of gave me, and this was just before I had my own healing experience. This was very connected to me wanting to die, to do with the baby that died. So I had,
Right.
again, I'd heard of Caroline. I wasn't really, and I heard of him having that ability, but it was never connected to my own journey in that way. But I'd experienced, and what he was teaching had nothing to do with that. It was just something that the psychologist mentioned to me.
What a brilliant intervention, first of all, for this
Yeah,
psychologist, right? At so many levels, right? Not only
yeah,
did he know or not know what abilities that you might possess, but probably
yeah.
not. But what,
No.
he's
Mm,
that person, that the messenger that led you to the next. And
yeah,
also, um, being a psychologist who has sat with many people who have felt like you have felt, um, it is a lot to hold. It's a lot to
mm,
hold being with someone who really wants to leave, wants to die.
yeah,
And there are a lot of different ways to go with that. And in my own experiences, was having to learn over time to stay in a very grounded state and not to come from a place of fear or
mm,
concern or
mm,
responsibility that I tend to feel for the people I work with,
yeah,
and to be a holding place to actually honor that place that we
yeah,
can get to, when
yeah,
very real things happen to us. Sometimes it's external, sometimes it's internal, and also, of course, to do what needs to be done to keep people safe in imminent situations. But I just have to say that
mm,
that was just brilliant of him knowing you well enough to know that that was something that you were like, yeah, let's go,
yeah,
as a way to inquire about living at the same time that you were wanting to learn more about dying.
yeah. Well, and it was really interesting because in that particular workshop, I did get to experience it on some level. There was a game essentially that was played, and a psychological one where you ended up going to an island, and there was a group of people, and you actually had to fight for your own life. And at that time, I didn't do a very good job, and I was the youngest in the group. I didn't do a very good job, and eventually you had to go through this experience of being kind of thrown off because you didn't fight enough and you weren't clear enough, and it was really powerful, I have to say, in the way it was done through different layers of it, and you had to sit with abandonment and rejection and all sorts of feelings, and express them. And for me, what was really interesting was that I had to sit for a while with the fact that I couldn't even fight for my own life at the time. I just couldn't see the point of it. And I
Mhm.
was, so young. And so I actually came back to this course after my own healing experience, and I got stronger. And I was like, okay, I have to do this exercise again. And this time I'm going to choose to live and to fight for it. And it was really powerful,
Mm.
as an experience, because I was drowning in my own, how can all this happen to me? And I think it's so easy when we talk about, difficult and painful experiences. But I haven't fully answered your questions. I'm just gonna complete
Mhm.
it, which is, I went through a lot of courses, because I really needed to have an understanding. I went to lots of different people who taught. I actually kind of went, okay, so I have this writing ability. How do I use this? I'm going to interview I'm going to try, at least I'm going to contact them and interview all these people that wrote books about this, and and connect with them, who I had now started to learn from and admire, including Dr. Bernie Siegel, and who wrote a foreword for my book eventually. And I, from doing these interviews, got to ask really deep questions as well at such a young age. And then I wrote for lots of different magazines who were open about, to these types of kind of understandings. And I think from there, I started to gain a bit more confidence because I kept tuning into people, including some of these very well known people, and where I really didn't know about people's health conditions. And I would pinpoint things to them, and at different times they would go, "Oh my God, well, my pain just left." And I started to see the connection between this understanding the purpose of pain that you started with, and the pain transforming inside a person's body. And eventually I started offering healing sessions, quite luckily for me, because my intention was to work with a doctor. Very early on, I'm not going to say straight away, but within a couple of years of me starting to do healing sessions, I actually met a doctor who was a holistic type of a doctor, but also did a lot of mainstream things, but was very open to other alternatives. Like, he had done acupuncture and all sorts of things. And we talked about the possibility of me working together with him so he had several rooms in his clinical practice, so that in some ways I felt that, again, that the pathway that KMAs took, that I could potentially take that pathway of having a doctor both send me clients, which he did send me a lot of clients, but if anything, when anything happened, he was next door.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
people could feel safe in that sense. And he was just absolutely amazing to work with. And I gained massive amounts of confidence working with him and discussing patients, because we would share patients,
Mm.
and him helping me to gain confidence, even into to the point where I remember saying to him, um, "Can I ask you about acupressure points? Because I've never studied them, but I really feel like I get a sense of where they are." And he would come into the room when I was with patients, and I would say, "I really feel like this patient could do with some acupuncture treatment." And he would say, "All right, well, show me where you think the needles should go." And I would literally pinpoint it. And I remember he said, "You know what? Why don't I just leave the needles? You can do it." And I was like, "There's no way in the world I'm doing that." But thank you, because I'm trying to learn the body from different perspectives, and there is
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, and it's somehow sharing this with me. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, in terms of my book, The Secret Language of the Body, I really saw how much we are similar, in a sense that the body has this incredible wisdom, and every part has wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter what storyline you lived or created in your life, there was wisdom in particular parts. And they would point us towards understanding our pain, understanding our story, understanding, what was, what things were really about. And I've just been fascinated ever since. And I've been
Mm.
studying from many different people, and I still do. Like, I actually, sometimes I share this, that in the last 2 years, I spent $15,000 on books, books that very few people would ever even, be open to
That's a lot of
reading
books.
or looking at.
That's a lot of books. So you are absorbing knowledge while you also are able to download and channel a lot of wisdom, right? So, and I love this. this relationship with this doctor. So it's more of the obviously this doctor was open to alternative medicines, was in alternative medicines too, but many would say that the type of healing that you practice would be, I guess, alternative, depending where we are, right? I mean, there's like here we have our Western medicine, and then we have alternative medicines, and then we have this whole other um, healing, whether we call it, psychic healing, medium.
Mm,
A lot of in the States, one of the abilities you have would be a medical intuitive, like that
mm,
you can see. And so
yeah.
the open mindedness allows for such beautiful collaboration. And it just shows with your diligence, you are seeking and seeking and seeking
Mm,
knowledge to make more knowledge to make sense of the knowledge that you actually have, but also how to build upon that. And I want to add for people the book, The Secret Language of the Bodies. I mean, it is a, it is a, I mean, talk a guidebook, a handbook,
mm,
it shows you. So this, I guess, where I'm going is because to your point, where all this, you have seen so many people in enough situations and medical conditions and ailments to know that something in the liver looks like this and is healed
mm,
by this. Um,
yeah.
so there's a whole chapter based on all the different medical conditions we can have,
Mm,
um, a very extensive one, and then equally all of well, parts of the body, the anatomy, and then also the different medical conditions. So you can look up you're having a liver problem, or you can
mm,
look up you're having psoriasis, or
mm,
or something else. So this has all come to a whole healing modality that you healed yourself. And many people will say, well, you have to have these abilities. She clearly has these tremendous abilities beyond the typical human experience. And yet you have taught hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people how to heal themselves through their classes. So I'd like you to say a little bit about how the person's watching or listening can say, who's saying like, yeah, well, that'd be great if I could do that. The part that like, no, you can, like you do have these abilities. Like, how do we stretch this human potential?
mm. And I think I'm going to say from that perspective also that you asked earlier, where, did I feel at different times like a fraud in a way? And I think the only time I really, really felt this fear was just before my book came out.
Mm.
Because I was like, oh my
Pressure,
God,
pressure. Yeah.
I'm so young. And I am, even though I've worked with a doctor, I am not a doctor. And how do and I've worked with many doctors, I'm going to say, over time, the time period that I've been doing this. So it was, kind of, I think one of the things that really helped me was that I actually sent the book to so many doctors, and there's so many testimonials from doctors, and psychiatrists, and
Mhm.
as well as psychologists and doctors that worked with, oncology and all sorts of things, and that gave me a lot of confidence to go, okay, I'm gonna take this book and this teaching out into the world, because I was young and I was, you know yeah, I was like, well, I didn't study medicine, but this is a different, I want medicine to come to this. So I feel like we need medicine, it's so important, but if we can combine this, and every time I hear that a doctor has my book at, his or her office, it's just amazing. And there's quite a few now, which is just, mind blowing for me, that they have that and this is happening. And so I think for people who go, well, you must have these special abilities, and you are special in that way. I just want to say that I actually had zero clue growing up. I mean, I had intuitive feelings, I'm going to say, but I think a lot of people do have that. Like, we just kind of, in different moments, have a knowing. And the thing that I realize is that we have senses, right? We have different senses, and we also learn differently. So, for instance, I realized I'm a very visual person, and I didn't know this until my own healing experience. So it's very easy for me to visualize, but not for everybody. Some people are more kinesthetic. Some people, have this more of a knowingness, or some people, have this sense of hearing that's very developed, or sense of taste or sense of touch or whatever it is, that they feel like this is my way into connecting with others. And connecting to your body is the same thing as connecting with others, right? Because it's a connection with yourself, and it is about that connection. So when I was writing The Secret Language of Your Body and putting all these pieces together, I looked at many different modalities, I'm going to say. I looked at, countless modalities around breath work, because it was something that I knew it helped me, but I also needed to find the ones that I felt was the most gentle, to be honest, because I wasn't going to be there, to hold somebody necessarily when they were doing this work. And so I went through countless courses and teachings around this and experiences to decide, everybody has an ability to breathe, right? You have to breathe to be alive. So it's like, well, if you can breathe, you are already, and do it consciously, you're already a step closer to healing and to discovering what's going on in your body. And then I looked at things like pressure points. So I looked at reflexology. I looked at, all sorts of pressure point modalities, I'm going to say. And I practiced them. I went to classes. I had countless books around about this. I knew a lot of practitioners that I went to who, I could converse with and go, well, how would you do this? And how would you do that? I did all sorts of particular yogas, in a sense of, I practiced yoga at the time as, for health reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and stretching and so on. But I also saw there were aspects that were not necessarily taught in classes that you went in terms of exercising, which is, how I found it. But, it was kind of like, well, if you opened your mouth in a particular way and breathed and touched your body, this could help with the lungs, or this could help with, another part of the body. So I wanted to diversify in a way that any practitioner of any modality could relate to this. I, learned a lot about acupuncture, like I said. And so I, kind of went, every person can do certain things. They can place their hands on a part of their body and breathe into it. They can ask questions. A child can ask questions. They can move their body in a particular way that's very simple and easy. They can shake their body. They can, some people are really good at visualizing. If they can't visualize, I'll just get them to think it or to let it go. And so I wanted to use everything that we had, but also everything that I learned that was simple enough for a person who didn't study it, that
Mm-hmm.
could do that. And it was safe. So
Mm-hmm.
safety was a huge part, that I would think about a lot. Is this safe for somebody to do? And most people could journal. Everything that I put in, I, at the time, would discuss with so many different practitioners as well. And I would work with my own clients. So by that stage, I had worked with thousands of people. And I would always get people to do processes at home. So I realized that, to me, it was like, how many senses can we use? How many parts of ourselves can we use to transform whatever we have? And if a person is weak in one area, great, that's fine. If I can use as many as possible, then they'll be strong in another area, and it doesn't matter. And so I realized that all of us, if we're open-minded, can go into and connect to our body. And I want to say body and soul, because it is, to me, it's not just the physical body. It's
Hmm.
so much more and deeper. There's a part of us that really wants us to get to know ourselves, and I think psychology essentially is
Hmm.
that.
Well, and sometimes we call it the emotional body, right? There's these
Yeah,
other, it's like these
absolutely.
layers, right? I agree, like the soul body, the emotional body,
Yeah.
um, there's just so much more. And what you're talking about is simple ways through a ton of research and practice, um, to help people get in touch with these different aspects of ourselves. Like
Mm.
when you had your initial experience, your initial healing experience, what you were shown, beyond showing the fire in your back and the twist of your
Mm.
back, you were shown traumatic experiences, multiple
Mm.
traumatic experience. You were shown traumatic experience of, so we talk about ancestral healing, which is, I know, a whole another category and
Mm.
topic. Um, all of that came in, and some people will say that is, through our soul, through our higher self, through our connection, um, our vast connection to more that than we are here now, but that we all have access to. And so what I always find this fascinating is about the possibilities. And for so many, it's it's exciting and it's scary. Like this idea
Mm.
that there is so much more that we don't know, that we don't understand, that is playing on us. And we want, the human condition is usually to try to make the uncertain certain, right? To minimize fear through control, and to make logical sense out of the world, and at times put sharper and more confined edges around them, so we have that certainty and that seemingly truth. And yet we know there is so much more than that available to us if we can have the courage, right, to go within, to go beyond, and to be open to that there's more than we currently know and can comprehend.
And it's so funny because you've just reminded me of a comment that my son made when he was about 18 or 19 or something. He said something like, I just wish that I grew up in a normal family and I didn't know this stuff. And I said to him, really? Why? And he said, because, there, you realize, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you feel like you need to learn. He's like, and I just want to leave like people who don't know anything. And I just thought it was something very kind of interesting to hear
Yes.
from
Yes.
from him at the time.
Very interesting, right? And of course, he's exposed to this through you, and it's, yeah, it totally speaks to, God. Can't we just have this simple? Can we just not
Yeah.
have this simple? I what what can you offer? I mean, we're going to talk about what you offer. You actually have a lot of offerings.
Yeah.
Before we talk about what you have to offer to those listening, where to start? Where to just open up and to have hope? Because of course, many people watching and listening um, have had traumatic experiences, have pain, have um, either diagnosed or undiagnosed situations that really take a lot of time and energy and impact their life. And so, what is that message to them?
I think the message is that if you are willing, right? If you're willing to start to explore, there's a few things that needs to happen. And one is that you have to slow down in your life. So if you're running and rushing and you're in this chaotic place, you're never going to have access to your body. It just doesn't work in that way. And it is what your body is asking. So if there's pain, if it's chronic, if there's fatigue, essentially your body is saying, hey, I need you to listen. And again, we're saying body, soul, emotional,
Mm-hmm.
I hope maybe one day I can come back and we can talk about more of this subtle bodies and all of this other stuff, because it's just so fascinating. And I have learned a lot about this. And essentially, so when we're, if we can be teachable, I'm going to start with this,
Mm-hmm.
and we can go, learning is exciting. And yes, I don't know what I'm going to learn, but what happens, and I'm this person who been doing this for over 25 years, and I don't believe in band-aids and I don't believe in step skipping. And I'm actually in the middle of finishing a book on different stages of healing, because we need to understand that we do go through these different and various stages. And the reason that people get disappointed and upset is that they are in a stage where, let's say, they need to slow down. And that is step one. And they need to acknowledge that slowing down is a huge step towards it. And as we slow down and we allow ourselves to be a student, and I write about this in this new book that I'm exploring, where it's like, what does it mean for you to be a student at this point and to learn without needing, as you were saying, a result immediately?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like there's a stage of exploration and there's a stage where we must learn to be open-minded. And the idea that the body is speaking to you through that soul, saying, hey, there's something here for you to understand and to grow with. And sometimes you'll still need medical help, and you may need to have surgery, you may need to have medical assistance. I'm not against that at all, and I don't ask people not to do that. I think that what you can do is you can combine, and you can go, sometimes I'll need to go to a doctor, sometimes I'll need blood tests, sometimes like I'll need to find out through a scan what's really going on, even if you know somebody who can do this, even if you have these abilities. You still may need to go,
Mm-hmm.
well, you know, let's use medicine in this way.
Yes.
But, you know, the medicine essentially, and having scans brings you back to your body, as opposed to away from it. And it brings you back to asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is to, as a student, you would ask questions and you would go, okay, so I have this physical condition. And one of the things I say, and this is a little bit later on in the journey, is where it started is probably not where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is, but very rarely. Usually it starts from a different wound or a different part. And there's an opportunity for you to create this roadmap for yourself, to actually start to examine your life, but from a perspective of, where did I get stuck? Where did I stop growing in my journey? And why? And also, what was the perception and a perspective that I took on?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what really changed, in my own understanding, was when I was in my early 20s and I listened to Candace Pert, and she had this, course that I bought. And she was talking about this experiment, and it just totally changed my whole perspective of everything. And she said that the experiment was with the people who had multiple personality disorders, and she gave an example of, let's call this woman Jane, who had three personalities. And in personality one, this person had diabetes and had to have insulin injections. And in personality two, she did not have diabetes. And this was medical, right? Because diabetes is a very quite serious.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
she literally, they did all the tests and there was no diabetes, but she had a skin rash and it was quite, it came out immediately on her skin. And in personality C, there was no diabetes. The skin rash disappeared And the eye color, and I thought this was amazing, the eye color of the person changed. And
Mm.
this was, again, this was
Yeah.
scientific experiment based on, that Candace Pert was involved in. And she was asking that question. So is it the body that gets sick? Or is it, who embodies the body? And I remember
Who
when she
embodies the
said that and I
body?
heard
Yeah.
this, right?
Wow.
I was like, oh my God. So so that this makes sense, because if we can link what personality traits we have, what happened, our perspectives. When somebody has a traumatic experience, the biggest thing that occurs that affects your health is your perspective. So
Right.
it's not the actual experience, but how do I have
Mhm.
this perspective? And most people don't know that they have it. And so they don't know it's affecting their nervous system, making them feel like they're going to run or in that fight or flight response, or have addictions, develop addictions, because that's the way of dealing with it.
Mhm.
And so when we start to really understand ourselves, then we start to understand that your body is not your enemy.
Mhm.
Your body is your friend that is saying, I have this condition because I want to help you transform. I want to help you stretch. I want to help you grow. And obviously, I can see the time. We don't have the time to go into archetypal work or
Yeah.
understanding the different stages of development connected to childhood, and how when we don't develop in certain ways, it then comes back later in life. Because I really believe in this, and because I've seen it, I've been really looking at this 7-year period where, let's call them recycling,
Mhm.
where you literally, and this is based on the fact that the body actually changes completely in every 7 years, and it's like you're not the same. But the question is, why do you still have eye issues? Why do you still have issues that you had, and maybe they're even worse? But if the body's completely different and changed, and that's because you have these perceptions and perspectives that are stuck. And when we start to understand archetypes, and where Jung
Yes.
kind of was the father of this incredible philosophy, and we start to recognize, well, actually, stages of development is not necessarily to do with trauma when you were younger, but they still could make you feel stuck and affect your relationships. And when your relationships are affected, different parts of your body are affected, like your chest, for instance, like your heart. And we know this already, like your neck. We say that pain in the neck, right? We know the heart is connected to intimacy. Why do we have so many relationship issues in our lives? Well, maybe it's connected to what we saw and what we took on. Why do people have reproductive issues? Most of the time when I'm working, or have worked with people with really, bad pains and traumas, we can come we can bring it back to many things that happen in teenage years and in the developmental stages of your body and your soul. So it's,
There's
there's so
so
much to
much.
learn.
Yeah, we're saying at the same time, we both said so much, and I feel like, I also go down the rabbit hole as I think about all of these things. Is you get to one layer and one door in, and then there's the next layer and the next layer. And when we look at the field of medicine, the field of psychology, the field of psychiatry, the field of chiropractics, the field of intuitive healing, like there are so ancestral healing, um, herbal medicine, like there are so many ways and layers and levels, and um, they all matter. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's always about, as we bring this conversation to a close, is how do we simplify for people to take the step and to not feel overwhelmed? I know you talk about the energetic overwhelm as well, which we didn't even get into. But I want to highlight, first of all, you, because you are so expansive in your thinking and in your experience in your work, and your book. I know you have several books, but we're talking about the secret language of the body. It's full of information, and you actually simplify
Mm,
everything, each condition, each part
yeah.
of our anatomy, to here's what it is, here's what it could mean, here's what you
Mm,
do. And so I
yeah.
want to say, for people who are listening and saying like, okay, my head is spinning right now, where do I start?
Yeah.
There is a place to start. And what I really also appreciated, what you talk about is slow down. When you said slow down, I actually took a big breath. I realized I
Mm,
wasn't even, like a big breath of slowing
mm,
down, and to be the student, for us to be curious and to realize that there is so much that we do not understand. There are things that other people understand that we can learn and read about. And you have these tools that people can
mm,
use without having to know all of these things, for them to get started on a new way, perhaps, or a continued way, depending on who they are, of understanding themselves, their healing, and I guess to take this home, what their body is telling them, because the body is the messenger, right? The body
mm.
keeps the score. Like it's the messenger to tell us where we can heal, expand, and grow.
Well, 100%. And I think that this, if we're just at the beginning of the journey, that's so exciting as well, because essentially there's so many basic things we can do. We can connect to the body through moving it. And I literally, I talk about it, I share it with people that some of the simplest steps is to just stand and shake your body and start to pay attention to how it feels different. To start to place your hands on your body and breathe into that area, breathing through your nose, out through your mouth with slightly pursed lips, just to connect to your nervous system. And as you're doing that, actually start to enter into the sensations and
Hmm.
explore the sensations inside your body, because the simplest things will become your practice eventually.
Hmm.
Waking up in the morning and, having a practice of actually scanning your body. When I say scanning it, I mean just going from your head down and going, is there any place in my body that feels uncomfortable? And rather than ignoring it, when I say befriending it, literally placing your hands there, breathing into it and going, what am I holding on to here? What's my body leading me towards? And maybe it was just this stressful conversation you had 3 days ago. Maybe it's to do with, some things that's coming up that you're afraid of. But what happens, as you know, Dan, that when this accumulates, and I hear sometimes people say, well, the way I deal with it is that I just don't deal with it. I just ignore it until it goes
Right,
away. And in my experience, it doesn't really go away. It
right.
actually becomes a physical
Yeah,
condition,
it gets buried into something. Yeah, yeah,
or a mental
yeah.
or an
Or
emotional
mental, right,
condition.
right,
That's why we have
right,
so many at the
right.
moment. It's like
Yeah,
crazy, but
yeah,
you can do things. And I think that, there's so much hope. And whether you're at the beginning of the journey and you just go, like, just place your hands on your body and connect and breathe, and that's your step one, and slow down and come back to yourself. Or whether you're on, you've done a lot and you're going,
mm,
where's my next step? And you heard us
yeah,
talk about so many different things.
yeah,
you know the journey is really, it comes back to knowing yourself and
yes,
working with yourself. And I think that's
yeah,
the most
yeah,
exciting part.
yes, yes. Well, Lena, thank you for sharing your story, your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, and it sounds like there is much more coming from you in your book and your work, and you continue to expand and grow and understand even more layers of what this human experience is culminates from and with. Tell everyone your website has so many resources, your master classes, both live and what they can do on their own time. So tell us where to go.
So you can go to my website and it's innasegal.com. So very easy, INNASEGAL.com. And, on the website, what we decided to do, because I just want people to have no excuses at this point, right? And usually for the last 20, something years, I would always charge people money to do these master classes, which are kind of like mini workshops. And most of the time they had to come in live to them and, participate if I was in that particular city or country. And for, a little bit of time, I just said to my partner, I just want to do some things to give back, like to really give back to people. And I want to do things, where they're free for people to at least discover and get to know this. And so on the website, people will find that there are many masterclasses. But if you are at the beginning of your journey, I'm going to say, and you've maybe bought my book, The Secret Language of Your Body,
There it is.
and there it is, yeah. And you've gone, wow, I would love a little bit more personal guidance. I want to just connect the pieces and understand a bit more and go deeper. Then, I have this masterclass called The Secret Language of Your Body Uncovered. And basically, you go to innasegal.com/secret and you can work with that masterclass. Or if you go, you know what, I've been on a journey for a while and I want to learn everything that is so powerful and profound. And I want to dive deeper and develop my own abilities. And I do want to say, Dan, that I have never met a person who couldn't develop their abilities if they put in the work. For some people, it takes longer. For some people, it's shorter. But we're born with this.
Mm-hmm.
That's the exciting part. We're born with this. Then I have a masterclass that dives deep into kind of awakening the healer within. And that's basically on my website, innasegal.com/masterclass. So super simple and easy to find, and then there's very specific topics that you can explore. But those two, are journeys into your own healing and health. And I also just want to say that even though you might be afraid to open the door, your body and soul usually only reveal things to you that at that time you're ready to deal with if you don't force and push it. And that's why I'm all for not skipping steps and just learning and discovering about healing slowly and not needing that, okay, within a few minutes we're healed. And I actually do want people to be a little bit skeptical about anyone who says that, because, instant healing is something that very few people even can understand what that's about. And it often doesn't hold unless you've really understood what it is about. And, although it can occasionally happen, I want to say that the journey doesn't, just because your pain goes away, does not mean the journey of healing stops, because it is about wholeness. And learning and working on healing is really learning about who you are and how you can be a better human, a better parent, a better partner, a better business person. Every part of it transforms because it is that wholeness, and it's very, very exciting.
It is that wholeness. That's what we're all looking for. Being whole in a world that it can often be challenging to be. So it takes it's intentional practice. And let's listen to Ina's wisdom to slow down Let's just start by slowing down, being curious, and being a student. Thank you, Inna. Inna is a healer. She's living it, she practices it, and she's teaching us how to listen and work with the secret language of our bodies. Here are 5 key takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, pain is not the enemy, it's a messenger. Inna reminds us that pain has meaning, and when we slow down enough to listen, we can separate pain from suffering and discover the story beneath the symptom. Number 2, healing begins with curiosity, not certainty. Her transformation started when she surrendered control, asked genuine questions, and allowed her body to show her the truth rather than forcing answers. Number 3, your past and even your ancestry lives in your body. Inna's journey revealed how childhood trauma, family dynamics, and generational pain imprint themselves physically until we're ready to witness and release them. Number 4, everyone has the capacity to heal. Despite her intuitive gifts, Inna emphasizes that self-healing tools, breath, touch, movement, journaling, awareness, are accessible to all of us when we stop rushing and begin reconnecting. And number 5, slowing down is the gateway to wholeness. Healing isn't a quick fix. It's a lifelong practice of listening, learning, integrating, and becoming whole, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So much wisdom in this episode, in this conversation, information that I am still processing and will be processing as I listen to my body and what it's telling me. We want to know what you think about this show and all of our other shows, what you think matters to us, and we are in community and connection with you. Feel free to DM us at Dr. Dan Peters on Instagram and comment on any of our posts on social. Thank you for being a part of our community, for subscribing, your 5-star reviews, and sharing this information with others. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.